I think we're going to win because our people, I think, which is so often the case in democracy, people are smarter than their leaders. Certainly speaking for Canada, Canadians got this on day one.
Last week, I brought you an access to information story about the communications between the finance ministry here in Canada and the World Economic Forum. Now, as many of you know, Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Freeland, sits on the board of the World Economic Forum, which could be in direct conflict with her roles here in Canada, because when Canada's best interests come in conflict with what the World Economic Forum wants to do, where does Freeland land? Now, those documents from last week showed an absolute explosion of communications between the finance minister and the World Economic Forum once Freeland became the minister. Previous minister Bill Morneau had just two somewhat glowing communications between himself and the global cabal of thought leaders, politicians, and the private sector, which is hell-bent on reshaping our economies and how we interact with each other without giving any of us a say in how it all happens. Now, I knew there would be more communications between Freeland and the World Economic Forum than just those going directly through her ministry in finance. So I started looking in other places where those communications might be. I found more at the Privy Council office, and I'll show you those today. For those of you who don't know, the Privy Council office, or PCO for short, supports the Prime Minister and Cabinet. It's led by the clerk of the Privy Council, and the department helps the government implement the government's vision, goals, and decisions in a timely manner. So it's different than the PMO. These bureaucrats support the ministers in their ministerial work. So I filed for access to information for documents from November 20th, 2019. So when Freeland assumed her role as minister, and January 4th, 2022, which is when we filed the access request. I asked for memos, briefing notes, reports, correspondence, emails, and comments regarding the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum. I told them to include copies of all communications with the World Economic Forum also. Now, this story is a year plus in the making, but it was made possible only through your generous donations to our special website, rebelinvestigates.com. So thank you to everyone who donates to offset our filing fees and research costs. You made this story come together today. So let's get into these documents. On page 10, we see a reoccurring theme presenting itself. Freeland wants to use government resources and government staff on her little side hustle at the World Economic Forum. Freeland wants bureaucrats to prepare her briefing notes for the World Economic Forum Board of Trustees meeting. But one page later, Global Affairs refuses, saying she's on the board at the World Economic Forum and she's not there in her capacity as Minister of the Crown or a representative of Canada. And further in these documents, we see that her role is clearly in a personal capacity, even though she wants taxpayer-funded bureaucrats to help her hang out with her World Economic Forum chums. Look at this. It's on page 26. Freeland is meeting, quote, in private on a one-on-one basis to catch up with her friends. Now, before I show you these next documents, keep this clip in mind. Take a look.
When I mention now names like Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now, the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
On page 68, we see a briefing note for Freeland on the World Economic Forum Young Global Leaders Forum, specifically mentioning Melanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, and Karina Gould, the Social Development Minister, as being alumni of the Young Global Leaders Forum of the World Economic Forum. On page 176, we can see the DPM, so that's the Deputy Prime Minister, is a member of the Board of Trustees in her personal capacity. And if this is a meeting with respect to her role in the board, normally no one provides the DPM support, as it is a personal matter unrelated to her government role. On page 179, Freeland is to lead the World Economic Forum COVID call that normally the World Economic Forum leader, head honcho Klaus Schwab, leads. Look at this. Schwab has been convening weekly dialogues every Wednesday between the World Health Organization leadership, public figures, foremost global experts, as well as CEOs of more than 400 partner companies. Past participants include McKinsey, and the Freeland-led call will include Johnson & Johnson. So to summarize, Freeland has been trying to use Canadian government resources to further her role at the World Economic Forum and to facilitate her work there. And she headed the World Economic Forum COVID call, which may have included lobbying and consulting firms like McKinsey that the Canadian government does business with all the time, as well as vaccine companies the Canadian government also does billions of dollars in business with. Nothing to see here. I guess it's all just a big conspiracy theory. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Today's story was made possible only through your generous crowdfunded donations to our special website, rebelinvestigates.com. We don't take a penny from Justin Trudeau. How could we ever hold him to account if we did? So thank you to everyone who donates to make this important work possible.